my book explores current interactions that people are having with these alien entities, including the infamous reptilians and insectoid types of beings, as well as ongoing interactions with bizarre but very human-looking beings that just seem alien, but they look human. Now, throughout all of this, believe me, I was well aware of how crazy some of this is going to sound to some readers. I'm quite aware of that. So in that sense, this was not a safe book for me to write, since I realized that I have jumped into some wild territory. Still, as I said earlier, I think this is a very useful thing to try. In my view, it comes down to something simple. If we are to acknowledge a genuine UFO phenomenon, right, something that doesn't appear to come from our civilization, and this is a conclusion I've come to for years, and it's a conclusion that many, many researchers have come to, obviously, for a long time now. So if we're going to work on that assumption, then it's very important, at least to try to get a handle on the likely scenarios of what we're dealing with. That is, who are they and what do they want? It's that simple. So as I state throughout this book, The Alien Agendas, we are at a severe handicap in understanding the answers to a lot of these questions that we want to ask. I mean, first of all, we're dealing with a phenomenon that is inherently very, very difficult for us to grasp. That's a really important thing to get a hold of here. All right, at least one and possibly all of these visitors or these others operate at very advanced levels. And it's just difficult for us to deal with that. That's the reality. And secondly, there is secrecy at all levels of what is going on here, starting with these other beings, as well as our own power establishment. And we all know that. But despite the difficulties, this is important to understand. Like, this theme is important, and this is exactly why I wrote this book. Many people don't realize that it's important because, frankly, the problem is kept far, far removed from their daily awareness. We all know this as well. Deep below the surface level of our world, of the ever-shrinking number of conversations and opinions that people are allowed to have, there is this nagging problem that is not going to go away no matter how deeply it's buried. So the title of my book, The Alien Agendas, I use the word agendas rather than agenda. I don't think that we're dealing with one single group. I think that our current state of development has prompted the whole neighborhood, the whole galactic neighborhood, to take a look at us. And not all of these other beings are necessarily bad or malevolent, and I really want to make this point. There are enough stories of people to this day who have had what they strongly believe are positive encounters with, well, some other beings. And, for a long time, I didn't personally really know what I thought about many of these types of claims. But honestly, there's just too many of them. And I personally cannot find a good reason to dismiss them out of hand. And it's also not illogical that there would be at least one group that has been here for a while and may want to help us. I don't think that that's, I think that's actually a logical assumption. And it does seem to be supported by the evidence of a number of these interactions that people have been having. And maybe the benevolent group or one of the benevolent groups is the one that's been here all along. I don't know. But there is enough diversity among these other beings that I do think we are looking at multiple groups and agendas. The main thing, I think, and which I suggest in this book, is that all of these groups are very interested in what we are now about to embark on, this transformation. As I've been saying for years, we are about to leap into their world, and I'm quite sure that they know this.
About to leap into their world.
About to leap into their world. That's a good quote.
Yeah.
Leap into their world. Yeah.
What is their world?
Well, it's almost like once the cat's out of the bag, like, if we're going on the same thread that you were talking about before, about they're watching our advancement, watching our evolution, where we're at. I think of the difference between me raising, like kids. Once I realize that they get something that I didn't previously think that they would understand, there's like this new thing where, at least for me, they've jumped a bit deeper into my world. And so I'm guiding them, but it was a jump that they made, And so it's almost, that's just the first way that I can think to explain something like that. Yeah. What he might mean by that. That's just why we need to get him on the show to ask him.
Yeah, well, and I think in a lot of ways their world is, an interstellar ability to become. We're now becoming a spacefaring species, and I mean, we're trying to just, it's still a challenge just to go to Mars. So it's not like we're really probably competing with anything close to what they have. But as space becomes more commercialized, as it becomes cheaper and easier to get a flight to go check out the moon, and maybe we put a moon base up or an outpost here soon, like it's gonna become harder and harder, I think, to suppress this. And you're gonna see more cases like Commander Fravor that are just extremely well corroborated, that are extremely hard to argue with. And if we get to a point where we're being shown actual ET bodies, or an ET is actually stepping out of a craft and saying, "Hey, I'm doing a YouTube live tonight. Come check it out." Like, it's gonna be hard for people to argue with that. And so yeah, I mean, this is their world though. Essentially, is they're already space. They're exploring space. They're exploring different species. They're at a point where they're able to really view this in a very scientific way, probably, and just sort of check in on us. So, also, their world to me is, man, like, the most exciting part of this is the culture. I mean, I couldn't imagine the type of cultural differences. Their music, their dance, their cinema, if they have these things. Or
it's funny, Star Trek.
Yeah, right. This is
in the last Star Trek. There was this one. I forget, but there was this one ET that was playing music, and it was Earth music. And I remember, was it Scotty? Who was it? Maybe it was Scotty. Yeah. Was saying like, what is that noise? And they're like, oh, it's music. And it turned out it was like Beastie Boys or something like that.
Right.
And she was like, what, you don't like music? And he was like, oh, I find it kind of loud and annoying, but you know, well, I mean, like the interesting thing about that is like, so I can't go too deep into this, but there is Bwiti music. Bwiti comes from Gabon, Africa. And they've been playing this music for quite some time, and it usually is paired with a shamanic rite of passage or initiation with iboga, which is the Mount Everest of psychedelics. It can last 3 days. You could be like in bed for 3 days from it. So anyway, this music is very polyrhythmic. If you haven't listened to Tool or King Crimson, this would be completely out of your norm, and you would call this annoying, clumsy music that can't stop interrupting itself.
Right.
That's what it seems like, you know. So it's interesting you mentioned that.
Well,
I'm also interested in the culture aspect of it,
and their level of understanding music. We really perceive it. I mean, there's obviously people who use sound healing and try to really use music in a more medicinal, health-based way now. It's pretty relatively new, I'd say, though. I mean, you argue, like you said, it goes back to indigenous cultures too, but just something like that, music alone. Imagine what they're tuning their instruments at, and how much they understand what vibration and frequency does in music and these certain tones, to where maybe they can make the most incredible music that not only is the most like entertaining, pleasing ever, but also basically because it resets you, like give you like a sound bath at the same time. So
totally. You know what? We'll dive into some of that technology, because there's a lot of vibratory technology coming out now that even shows that the brain harmonizes like a symphony.
Right.
And when under psychedelics, it opens up the symphony into something far more complex. Whereas with alcohol or even just baseline default mode consciousness, it's rudimentary, let's say, a rudimentary toolkit, you know, but then it opens up into this symphony. So interesting points. Let's definitely get to the last clip with Richard Dolan.
Underlying all of this massive untold story is the question of whether this is all a good thing or a bad thing. Well, one of the things that many, not all, but many abductees talk about from their human hybrid handlers is about some sort of coming great change. If you go back on this channel and you listen to the interview I did with Dr. David Jacobs from a couple of years ago, he talks quite a bit about this. But a number of people have mentioned this, and from a number of different abduction researchers, not just David. Quite a few abductees have talked about this, that they have heard about this from the hybrids or the hybrids that they have interacted with, that there's going to be a great change coming, a great change. No one gives any details. One thing to me that is quite obvious about that is that we are going through this great change right now. This is not necessarily something that the aliens are going to be causing. It could very well, and I think this is the case, something that they knew about and is happening. We're doing the great change right now. And it's not something that's happening overnight, but it is something that's taking place over the course of a couple of generations. It's not that long in the grand scheme of things. It's happening. Our society is moving into something totally different that's never existed before. And it's a fair question as to whether or not it's becoming literally anti-human, or at least non-human, some kind of non-human environment. It is clearly, in my view, becoming disconnected from our natural state of being. So that is a question we really want to be asking, and I do ask this. But this great change, this is the key, it seems to me. Whether it means that humans will still, maybe there's the positive aspect of it, like we'll all develop higher consciousness and higher intelligence and become peaceful and somehow better. Maybe. I don't know about that. But or maybe we're just going to be turning ourselves into one giant anthill. You can reflect on those possibilities yourself. But here's the thing. The outcome of this change matters a great deal. And this is why I conclude that one or more of these groups aren't just interested in monitoring and observing this process, but I believe quite possibly trying to manage this outcome. And this can happen through a variety of means. It can happen from quiet and strategic infiltration. It can come through some form of control or leverage over that process in any number of ways. Or it could happen by other means that I haven't even thought about, or maybe no one has thought about. It is not hard for me to imagine that some groups would want to control this process that we are going through, because it is a very powerful process with tremendous implications. What we are doing here in this transformation, as scary as it is to many of us, and it scares me, I'm not going to lie about that, but what this process is doing on one level to some people and to some groups is incredibly valuable, like literally something of great intense value. What our civilization is creating in this transformation has value to a number of people, because it is giving this species, our species, tremendous power that is coming out of this technological and ultimately societal and ultimately biological transformation, because genetic engineering is figuring into this too. So this is a powerful transition that we are going through. And that means it is potentially dangerous to other groups, and it is potentially disruptive to other groups. I'm not persuaded at all by people who say, oh, they're so far ahead of us that why would they want to worry about us at all? I don't believe that. I think what's happening is change doesn't happen on a gradual scale like this. It doesn't just go bit by bit by bit. No, it doesn't work like that. It goes bit by bit and then leaps, bit by bit and leaps, and so on. That's what these revolutions are about. That's what these transformations are. So we're in the process of a transformative, qualitative leap to something fundamentally different. The transition from hunting and gathering to agriculture wasn't just a little bit more of the same. No, that was a dramatic transformation. The transition from an agriculturally based society to science and industry was not just little bits and pieces here and there. No, it was a dramatic transformation, qualitative difference. And that is what we're going through now. And that's going to take us to a substantially greater level. You think about with strong post-singularity AI, nanotech, the mind boggles at all the ways that these different technologies are going to be interacting with each other. We really cannot imagine this, but it's radically different.
There you go.
I like his style. I like his demeanor and the way he comes at this. It's pretty interesting. And that guy, I can definitely say, is one of the ones who's probably done the most meticulous research that I've seen. I'm really glad we started off with Danny Sheehan as well, because he made that point. We still most of the times find ourselves to be the center of the intellectual universe, that we are at the apex of intelligence. And in many ways, I think that is an easy way to understand our place, because we don't have many examples of another species that can be more dominant than us. Like I do believe there's species on this planet that in some ways are far more tapped in, tuned in, orcas and dolphins. There's so much more to understand about consciousness, but we really do find ourselves to be at the forefront of intelligence in our perceivable universe. That alone will create the biggest shift if and when people can even allow themselves to believe And this is actually where I think, like, allow themselves to believe that there are other intelligent entities out there, entire civilizations. I also find it very curious that at the same time we are developing what he's saying, post-singularity strong AI. That's singularity is, we're not there yet,
Yeah.
and then post-singularity strong AI, you're really talking about something super sophisticated. So yeah, it's just kind of interesting that when you're looking at this, it'll give some people the easy out in a way. It's almost like a get out of jail free card. You can get out of this awakening if you choose not to have there's something about trust and discernment. We talked about this last time. But with all this technology, let's say we did see a video where an ET comes stepping out of a craft that landed on the White House lawn. I couldn't see 100% of people believing their eyes.
Yeah.
Their own eyes. Even if people, well, that's the thing. They would call it a deep fake. And you know what? If I only saw it on video, I would have to really, really do my research. If I saw it with my own eyes, I'm not saying all my skepticism would go, because I know sometimes that is what illusion and, practical, not practical magic, but, I'm talking like David Blaine, that kind of stuff. You can be tricked. There are tricks of the eyes, and we know how other smart humans learn those tricks of the eyes. What about an intelligent, being? Oh no, we can't believe that, because then we'd have to believe this is actually real in front of our eyes. I just wonder how many people would even allow themselves to believe something, even if they saw it, even with their own eyes. They were standing there thinking that, oh, well, it must be holographic tech or blah, blah, blah. The whole Serge Monast idea that we were talking about, Project Blue Beam, or there'll be some fake invasion. It is an interesting phenomena where I wonder what it would take. And when Charles Eisenstein was talking about all the timelines, like some people, you're looking at the same exact thing, but you decode it in a completely different way, and you can remain still skeptical. And that one anecdote, maybe I'll just get to it. I was talking earlier about Pete Evans and a camera guy, and we were all standing outside. We were there with Max Montrose. He's a cannabis aficionado, and he was pointing up, and he was like, look at that thing up there in the sky. And we started looking, and he's like, that's not a star. And I started looking. I mean, no one was saying anything, and he was like, it's not a drone. It's way too high to be a drone. So I was looking at it, and every time I would see it do this little skip or a jump, the people to the right of me would be like, oh my God, there, it just happened. And then the other two, Pete Evans and my camera guy, Alex, they didn't say anything. But when we got in the car and we left, I didn't say that I saw anything, but I asked them, I was like, so what did you think of that we saw outside? Because I was a little skeptical, and they were like, what do you mean? Thought of what? And I was like, well, that object in the sky. And they were like, you mean the star? And I was like, so you didn't see it moving or jumping around or anything like that? And they're like, no, not at all. But I did. And I didn't even mention it in that moment, because I was like, what could that, was I just so wrapped up in their moment, which I was actively being skeptical in the moment, but was I just being wrapped up by some trick of consciousness that they were playing? Or did I see something that was available to my timeline, to my open mind, and the other two didn't? And so they had a different experience growing up. They have different beliefs. They saw something different. These are all things that, it's just very curious the way that humans come to allow their worldview to change. Because some people, they just push back no matter what. I believe something big is coming. And I think that people are going to allow Occam's razor, the most simple explanation to themselves, to be the thing that they believe. Right? Because, I mean, like people who say the earth is flat, outer space doesn't exist, it's something else out there. They would have a completely, and probably some logical trains that break down somewhere, like all of our logic, explanation for all of this. And so it's just super curious to me. I wonder what it would take for there to be a single event or series of events where critical mass starts to all think the same thing at the same time, and it's a wild opening of what is intelligence, what is out there. Are we the big kids on the block anymore?
Make sure y'all head over to benjosephstewart.com, become a member. You'll have access to the growing library of deeper dives where I talk about all the stuff that I really can't talk about on YouTube. Make sure you get involved in the Discord chat. That's where a lot of the conversation is happening, talking about new theories, being able to interweave into the greater conversation that is how we awaken infinity. That's our highest potential. And I just want to remind you, you are the most powerful technology ever known to creation. Wield it like an artist with a conscience.